Hi there, it's Mark from An American in Russia. Now before I start, I have a little story. So I go through and I edit some of my father's old family films if I can use them to tell the story. I noticed in one of the old clips from about 60 years ago that I was wearing a pair of colorful shorts. Then I noticed that 60 years later, while viewing this old film, that I'm wearing the same pattern shorts. Life is strange. Like so many competitions in life, we always seem to remember the winner, but rarely remember who came in second place. The space race was undoubtedly the best type of race which occurred during the Cold War. The Great Space Race actually started towards the end of World War II when both the Soviet Union and the United States were both racing around doing all that they could to capture as many of the top German rocket scientists as possible. The German rocket industry was much more advanced than in any other country, and both the US and the USSR knew that they needed these German scientists to jumpstart their rocket programs, because they understood rockets were the future of warfare. But here, let me pull back for just a minute. The purpose of this video series is to show what life was like for a young American boy during the times of the Cold War. By the way, I was the young boy. To this end, I'll be using some of my father's old family films to properly frame each time period to show what life was like for me during that time period. Well, by 1962, my family lived in our own single-family home, and my father and uncle were in the process of adding a family room and a two-car garage to the home, effectively doubling the home size. Now remember, my father was only a teacher and my mother a housewife, so we were mid to lower level, middle class really, financially, but thanks to the GI Bill, my father and men like him who served time in the military were able to obtain low interest, no down payment mortgages. And just a parenthetical observation, I never noticed this until I started editing my dad's old family photos or old family movies together. Almost any time an airplane or jet flew over when he was filming, the camera would just move from the family to the jet. Why I found that funny is because I'm the same way. And it was cool to learn this about my dad these many years later by watching his filming. Now, I've had to learn restraint though. I live in Russia, and with the Russian-Ukrainian conflict going on, it is not at all unusual to hear a loud sonic boom as a jet fighter slows down just under the sound barrier. This is followed by seeing a jet fighter or jet fighters flying overhead. I have to exercise true restraint in these situations. I suspect that if my neighbor saw the American guy next door running outside snapping photos of Russian jet fighters overhead, that I could expect to be visited by some serious-looking guys in gray suit jackets with some serious questions. Okay, back to 1962. Well, it was my 5th birthday. My birthday is February 20th. And I had something special to watch on television that morning at about 9:15 a.m. My mother turned on the TV for me, and while it was warming up, and yes, TVs had to warm up before you could see a picture, well, my mind was racing ahead because within seconds, I would be sort of famous. Suddenly, the picture sprang to life and, hey, what the heck? This wasn't supposed to be happening. Yeah, February 20th, 1962, otherwise known to me as my 5th birthday, had been hijacked by John Glenn in his trip into space to orbit the Earth 3 times.
+6 is ready for launching. John Glenn is inside the spacecraft.
Check Mercury umbilical.
10, 9, ignition sequence start. 5, 4, we have ignition. All engines are running.
Roger, we're programming and roll okay. and 3 times around this Earth of ours in the next 15 minutes.
Roger, 0G, and I feel fine. Capsule is turning around. Oh, that view is tremendous. Texas Capcom Section 7. We are recommending that you leave the retro package on to the entire re-entry. This is Friendship 7.
And no, he didn't just hijack a few minutes of my birthday, but rather many, many hours. I did not like John Glenn that day. There was even the drama that his heat shield had come loose, and they were afraid that he would burn up coming back through the Earth's atmosphere. Talk about sucking all the oxygen out of the room, huh?
This is Friendship 7, a real fireball outside, and I think the tank just let go.
So as he started his re-entry, all of America watched, worried but hopeful, thinking and praying only about him. I don't even think my own mother was concentrating deeply enough on the fact that it was my birthday.
Friendship 7, this is Cape, over. Friendship 7, this is Cape, do you read? Keep talking now. Friendship 7, this is Cape, over. Friendship 7, this is Cape, how do you read, over? All right, you're reading you loud and clear, how you doing? My condition is good, but that was a real fireball, boy. Friendship 7, Friendship 7, it is steelhead, over. Go ahead, steelhead, Friendship 7.
Now, regarding the Cold War, the USSR surprised the US with the launch of Yuri Gagarin into space, where he orbited the Earth once. The US followed 3 weeks later with the launch of Alan Shepard. Now, the Redstone rocket, which launched Shepard, was not powerful enough to send him into an Earth orbit, but it did act like a huge gun, and it shot him 116 miles above the Earth, or 185 kilometers. Technically, space starts at 60 miles, or 100 kilometers above the Earth. So he was in space. Now, he touched down about 300 miles, or 500 kilometers away. Hell of a gun. The second U.S. astronaut was Gus Grissom, whose flight, well, was very similar to that of Alan Shepard's, but with a very big difference when it splashed down. If we have time later in the video, I'll share a few details. Now, I'm trying my best to rush through the technical details. I mean, I love this stuff, but I know that it'll make many of your eyes grow glazed and sleepy. John Glenn traveled into space on the much more powerful Atlas rocket, not the Redstone, and it was powerful enough to launch him into Earth orbit. He performed 3 orbits of the Earth in a little more than 4 hours. Then the heat shield drama began. Well, by the time John Glenn was back on Earth, it was already mid-afternoon of my birthday. Yeah, thanks, John. Well, let me just explain what I was hoping to see on television just before John Glenn so rudely stole my limelight. There was a local television program on each weekday from 9:15 till 9:30 a.m. It was called The Hap Richards Show. Hap Richards was the mayor of Joyville, and I was a citizen of Joyville. How did one become a citizen of Joyville? Well, their mother had to send a letter to Hap Richards telling him about some chores that you helped her with around the house. After that, he would issue a certificate, which I hung on my bedroom wall, saying that I was a citizen of Joyville. Now, being a citizen of Joyville came with certain rights and privileges. Among these was that during the last few minutes of the program each day, there was a big picture of a birthday cake, and any citizen of Joyville whose birthday was on that day, why, their name would scroll across the birthday cake, and you would be famous and loved by all those throughout the world, or at least those watching the program in the greater Hartford area. Well, I finally got to be a citizen of Joyville, and the proof hung on my bedroom wall. February 20th, 1962 was to be my first entry as a citizen of Joyville on the birthday cake. Then, John Glenn happened. I finally made my peace with John Glenn years later. Well, not face to face. I mean, John Glenn didn't even know I existed. John went on and became a very famous senator from the state of Ohio. And then later he traveled into space again. When he was 77 years old, he traveled on the space shuttle. He was the oldest human being ever to travel into space. So, kind of cool bookends. Now, I just want to remind you that all of this happened during the height of the Cold War. And I mean, well, during the Cold War, we also had the space race going on, which was cool, non-violent. But it was the Cold War. And something I can say is neither my parents nor the parents of any kids that I knew ever used to try to fill them with fear of nuclear warfare. I mean, never used to tell them basically that we lived 30 minutes away from total nuclear destruction. But we did. But parents weren't like that then. And I was very happy never to have this fear gnawing away at my heart when I was a young child. No, I grew up in a different point in time, and I count myself very fortunate to have had the parents that I did. Just a funny little incident that happened one of these many times my father was filming airplanes flying overhead. As he filmed the airplane, suddenly a man jumped out of that airplane in a parachute. Yeah, I grew up in a wonderful time where you were never really sure what might happen next. It was like a real life video game that you were partaking in many respects. I was so fortunate. I hope I provided a little more insight to you today about what it was like being a young boy growing up during the Cold War. I guess I'll try to continue doing this series provided that I get some viewership on this video. In any case, until the next video, Paka.